Welcome to the Tech Simple podcast. Independent insights into the latest AV technologies, as well as tips and best practices to optimize AV solutions for modern workplace and learning environments. Here are your hosts, David and Jonathan from Konnectus AV Consulting.
Welcome to another episode of the Tech Simple podcast. As always, I'm Jonathan Cuthbertson, and joining me today is my good friend and colleague, David Allara. Welcome, David.
Hey, Jonathan. Thank you so much. And welcome to you, actually, in China for this particular recording of the podcast. So that's pretty cool. Our first international recording. How's life in China over the last 2-3 weeks, mate?
It is boiling hot over here at the moment. 30 plus degrees and sweltering, but through the magic of the internet, we can be all here today together.
Yep. Beauty of technology. Appreciate you taking the time to do it remotely. Look, I'm very excited about today. We have covered last go around, the world of acoustics in the workplace, and something that, can go hand in hand really is specialist lighting. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Lighting design in the workplace. And we've got two experts, I suppose, experienced people from this area, decades of experience combined between them. We have Michelle Goupy and Linsey Walker, and they're both from Light Studio MG. Thanks so much for joining us, Michelle and Linsey, and welcome.
Thanks very much, David.
Hi, David. Thanks for having us on and jumping.
Look, very excited to have you here today. I mean, we're going to be talking about a few areas. First of all, we're going to be talking about, how lighting design can actually affect people's moods in the workplace and sort of make it a little bit better and more positive experiences. Then we're going to sort of talk about video conferencing and optimizing lighting design for that. And lastly, and I think what's going to be really interesting, is where we talk about some interesting trends in the technology, lights, and also from a design perspective. So that's what we've got look forward to the next 20, 25 minutes or so. But tell us a little bit about your backgrounds, Michelle and Linsey. I mean, apart from the obvious thing, which I can't help overlooking, and that is your firm, Lighting Studio MG, was founded in the same month as Konnectus. So January 2013, there's obviously something in the water. We had some bright ideas together, and we came up with, getting started with our own design and consultancy firms. What spurred you on, Michelle, to get started with your own firm?
Well, that's a question I haven't been asked for a while, but on reflection, I think that time of my life, it just made sense. There's the lighting design world, or here in Sydney, Australia, there weren't too many companies, and I reached a point in the previous studio where I thought, I've got enough runs under my belt, and I thought I'd take the leap and take a risk and do something that I suppose told people about who I'm about, who I am. So really, that's with the support of the family and my wife, I was able to do that quite. And here I am today, and here we are today, with a nice little team, growing well and doing some really amazing work.
And is lighting design for the workspace predominantly what you do, or you work in some other sectors as well?
We're fortunate enough to have experience in a number of different facets of lighting design. Hospitality is a key one that really supports what we do in the workplace.
Okay.
We have done retail as well. And residential is certainly part of the mix. And we're really fond of heritage work, actually. That forms part of our portfolio. But over the last 10 years, workplace has been there consistently from the start. But we've drawn from those experiences to be able to inform our design in the workplace.
And I guess what I'd sort of like to talk about with you today, being such experts in the field, is lighting is very much people-centric, people-focused, isn't it? You're trying to create an ambience, an experience for people. I mean, there's obviously, codes to comply with and things like that, and that's all fine. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more deep and meaningful than that, isn't it? I mean, maybe we could go through some examples, or you could talk to that point and tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, lighting is an intrinsic part of architecture and interior design. I'd like to think what we do is create a space or finish off the space, if you like, and there's a feel factor to it. It's not just functional lighting. It's something that's inviting, something that gives you a sense of comfort, and it really ties the interior design or the architecture together. It's not about putting light fittings in a room, but it's understanding what those lights will do for that function. And fast forwarding to the end result is that we try to light things quite purposefully. It's not just a lux level approach. It's what Linsey and I do is really curated type design, and it's really a collaboration between designers, interiors, architects, engineers, yourselves as AV specialists. We touch all points of design, and we're really interested and intrigued by all the other facets that come into play, because lighting does affect almost everything, even mechanical. We kind of influence certain decisions, not just architecture and interior designs, but how mechanical works or where mechanical goes. So it's kind of an interesting sort of position to be in.
That's quite an interesting point you make, hitting levels. And forgive me as an engineer, purely focused on, do we meet this requirement? Do we meet that requirement or that level? But, you make a great point that so much more, lighting is so much more than just meeting a requirement. It can completely change the feel of the space and how someone reacts to that space, whether they actually want to be in there or not. And just lighting it adequately is not enough these days.
Well, it's not. And Linsey can sort of elaborate on this as well. But as I said before, we bring our experiences from a whole host of other industries or sectors. And one of the key ones is hospitality. And, that's really where that sort of feel factor is important. And creating the mood, creating the right sense within the space is critical. We don't light things evenly in the workspace. We understand compliance, but it's important to understand that there's a visual aspect to this, and it's really important to entice people, especially now given the way we work. It's not just coming into the office anymore and sitting within a set of walls and a grid of tables. It's no longer that way. Agile work is here and it's here to stay, and it's more and more important now to design spaces that attract people back into the office and really make people more connected, I guess.
Yeah, I think the post-COVID office is definitely designers now are trying to make it feel different. And I think that's where we can really assist with that. And the kind of lure to get people back in, if you like, is the point of difference. I think people want to sit and focus now. Most times people are more comfortable doing that at home. And so actually going into the office is more about collaboration and, the agile kind of workspace where you can go off and do something, take a call, but then come back and collaborate with your peers, and maybe go have a coffee and connect on a personal level with some people. And it's moving through those spaces. I think if we're doing our job properly, you don't feel the transition between those. You don't notice the lighting fixtures making the difference, but you feel the difference between those spaces, and you feel more compelled to sit in certain areas or maybe move on in others, and that I think is the important part and what makes the workplace lighting very important.
I think you're right. Definitely the business leaders that I speak to, leaders in the industry, whether they be in design or workspace, they are all looking for that next level quality and experience for the people working in the business and the people visiting the business. What are some examples that you could maybe quickly describe or talk through maybe some previous case studies on where you've added your layer of lighting expertise and design just to improve a space or make it more inviting or more fit for purpose when it comes to collaboration or agile working?
There's a couple of projects that we finished off over, say, the last 3 or 4 years, actually, that come to mind. One of the ones, probably more recent, is in town here in Sydney, where the client didn't quite understand why they were getting us, but they kind of knew that they needed us. And the point there is, it's no longer a want, there's a need for lighting design. But in that particular case study, they didn't really understand what it was that they were really asking for. And we demonstrated that through, the concepts that we put together and the ideas that we discussed with them, and really took them on a journey and made them aware of what the possibilities are with lighting.
Yeah, some simple techniques, I guess, rather than traditional just lights in the ceiling, down lights. Still down lighting from above down, but lighting vertical surfaces and having something integrated into joinery to get more human scale and lower your eye point and make it feel more comfortable and welcoming. And just small touches can, working with the interior design of the space, can really make quite a key difference.
Yeah, and if you take a step back, actually, even before we start talking about the details, we try to understand the whole project and its positioning and location, what the external factors are, such as daylight, the finishes of the space, whether there's light or dark, the height of the room, the functionality of the spaces. And we put all that together and formulate a design approach that we can discuss with the client and explain what the results would be. And it's kind of the exciting part of the project, really. Really gets them involved and really understand what lighting design is. And we found that they really respond quite well with visual information. And precedent projects that we've worked on, we've showed them the results, and it really comes through.
And when you're working with a customer and or interior designers, I can imagine you have in your minds a good sense of how things will look and how things will turn out. But it must be difficult to communicate that to a non-lighting expert. You know what I mean? This is definitely something that we struggle with in audio and video, trying to explain how the audio will sound or trying to explain how the video image will look. With lighting, I imagine it's similar. Do you use a lot of, say, computer modeling to try and communicate in a visual way just to help break down that barrier and make it simple for people to digest and understand?
Yeah, look, we certainly go down the technology path. But, sometimes the best thing to do is bring a few luminaires in the room and start pointing and showing them the differences of lighting, because lighting is not just about a luminaire. It's about, what comes out of that luminaire and the effect it's going to create. And you talk about the technology then as within that discussion. But really sometimes the simplest thing is to use a light fitting. Everyone's seen a light fitting, but what does it actually do and what are the performance characteristics of it? But yes, technology is an important part. You can't necessarily do that on a large scale project. You can't bring light fittings for everything. But on the bigger projects, for example, we use simulation programs that give the client an understanding of what the end result will be. And they are highly visual, three-dimensional renderings, if you like, that are actually calculated. So they're scientific models that not only look good, look the part, but they actually show the performance, the luminance results, and so forth.
I'd like to transition into video conferencing, and Jonathan, you can probably lead this conversation. Obviously, lighting is so crucial, isn't it, with how people look. We were talking just before we got started, Jonathan, just about the popularity of small sort of 1-2 person focus rooms in workspace, but it's always been a challenge to light people correctly, to make sure people are looking the best they possibly can in any size meeting room.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm sure everybody has seen the person sitting at home before where their lighting has been, a single, light bulb in the center of the ceiling or a bright window behind them. And all they see is shadow. They can't see the person, and they're dark, and, you don't even know who you're talking to, really. And we see the same thing happen in, commercial environments and workspace when the lighting is not considered And we're talking about, yes, the actual light fittings or the fixtures, but also, how do you control the natural light as well to then create that optimal environment for video conferencing and for the camera to pick you up. I remember actually going back to the small rooms that we were just speaking about earlier today. As we're moving into these agile environments and we're talking about creating a different experience in the workspace, you no longer have people taking calls at their desks. What you have is these small, 1 or 2 people rooms where, I don't want to interrupt everyone around me. So I'll get up and I'll move over into that room and I'll take my Teams call or my Zoom call or my WebEx call, whatever it might be. But quite often, the quantity of those rooms, people forget, you need to provide a good lighting solution in there if people are going to be doing these one-on-one calls. You want people in your organization and your team members to look their best. People are even going to the extent of creating a backdrop for them. Maybe it's the company logo or maybe it's a nice feature wall behind. So when you're on camera, you're looking fantastic. But lighting plays a big part in that.
It certainly does. And I think more and more as we work in this environment, in workspace predominantly, we're finding that people, as I said before, people need the lighting. It's not a want anymore. They really have understood that there's a missing factor in, they put all the technology in there, yet lighting is something that in the past at least has been not necessarily overlooked, but played down. Those smallest sort of meeting rooms around the core of a typical office fit out are still have troffer lights. There's still gridded ceiling lights, but there's nothing there that helps present the person in front of the camera as well as that could be.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. That's just one time I was chatting to a client on a Teams call and was explaining why vertical lighting it was important in general illumination and not having shadows. And he was in one of these 1-2 people pods, and he said, "Oh, you mean like just now? How you can't really see my face? I understand exactly what you're trying to say." It was actually brilliant. It told us perfectly, but it's very prevalent a lot of the time. And until you point it out, people don't necessarily realize either, which is interesting.
Yeah, they don't. And coupled with that is the control as well. Like, let's just, now we've got lighting, good quality lighting, facial illumination. But people also want control of that. They want to have the flexibility and manipulate their environment. So that's it's a nice thing to have. We already have it, in fact. And, if we're collaborating together, Jonathan and David, it's part of the design. But giving that functionality to the user of the space is even more, powerful. It creates a space that I think people want to use a lot more because they can adjust to their needs.
Yeah, it's something quite simple. I guess simple to us because we deal with it every day, but if it's not in your thought process, but having, as Michelle was saying, a couple of different functions or scenes in your meeting room, so you can have full meeting mode when it's on screens, and you can have the indirect ambient lighting so that it gives general lighting around. Everybody looks quite good. Like you mentioned, Jonathan, maybe the wall behind is also lit so that you don't get too much contrast. People are thinking about having something interesting there. You can bring it out and the whole room is balanced and looks great together. But then perhaps the interior design element or more stylized with like a chandelier or a pendant or something a bit different, or if it's say a boardroom, well, that's not, maybe that looks fantastic but not always appropriate for your lighting levels if you're trying to have a full blown conference VR. So being able to turn that off independently and dim things up and down to meet the appropriate levels is something that once you explain it to people, they really understand it, but a lot of people don't think about that either. So it's good to help them along the way with that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I would love it if every room was always used for AV and technology, but more and more I see the spaces also being used for things like dining as well. A lighting scene that might be appropriate for having a video conferencing meeting, if you're just there having a lunch or a dinner, may not be the most appropriate lighting condition.
That's a very interesting point, yeah.
I think definitely some trends have emerged. You're right. In workspace, we're seeing an attempt to get more versatility, more flexibility, just spaces doing more things. And so having some, different lighting scenes or, design that caters for different ways of use, I think is very important. But also just back to the video conferencing, I think it's become a must-have, every day, each and every one of us are on a number of video calls, aren't we? I mean, that's just the nature of how we're working now. So, and as cameras get better and better and are zooming in on our faces, it's now a close-up. We can't sort of, pretend we're sitting at the far end of the table and you can't really see us. We're just looking like a dot in the table. Now you're looking at a close-up of our face and, we don't want to, look 20 years older. We actually want to look good. And so all of a sudden the need for proper lighting in almost every space, which is technology enabled, is now a must have. So for those listening, I mean, let's probably try and give Bill and Lindsay, what are the top 3, in order of priority, design tricks that end customers should be designing for or thinking about?
On the positive, it's probably a few more, but I'll try to reduce to 3. I think the main thing is about reducing shadows. So indirect illumination is fundamental in a space where VC is required. And whether it's a lit wall or whether the ceiling's lit or, as you said before, a bit of artwork behind you is illuminated, that's important. But the facial illumination is paramount, or good quality, high color rendering luminaires that we use to represent someone's face in a different country. It's critical. It's critical to get that right. I haven't really gone in any particular order, sorry, David. But it's all part of it. Well, I guess what I'm saying is you can't have one without the other. You need indirect illumination, you need good background illumination, and you need to have the right contrast so that there's clarity on a VC scenario.
What do you think, Lindsay?
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely something not just straight down from above there. And I think that's probably what a lot of people try and do, just have a light above them, but you end up with really quite sharp shadows and not the kind of ambient. And then it ends up being very high contrast with a lot of very bright areas and dark areas. And instead of trying to make yourself look the best, you kind of end up in like a bit shadowy and gauntly in the call instead. So that's probably the most important thing, I would say, on the face, and if you can, at a lower level rather than just straight down and direct. Yeah.
Well, now I want to move on to the cool part of this podcast. I was at a trade show last week, and it's a technology trade show, so of course the question on everyone's lips at every booth is, what's new? What's coming up? What's the new trends? Everyone wants to know what's new. So as subject matter experts, we would love to know, John, I would love to know what's new in lighting. What's the new trends? What's the new product types? Or what are we going to be seeing or, is already out there maybe that would be relevant to the audience, leaders in workspace?
Yeah, I guess the developments of what's existing. I mean, LED is really, been the talk, isn't it, over the last 10 or 15 years, and it's just gone from strength to strength, or it's gone smaller and smaller. So miniaturization is certainly part of the development of lighting, and having a small form factor with a higher lumen package or higher light output is getting, is where it's gotten to. And, part of the design process is we don't want to see light fittings in the ceiling, and the miniaturization has helped us to reduce the visibility of light sources in the ceiling. And really, our design approach is all about what the light fittings do, not seeing light fittings as such. So that's really an important development in our world. At the same time, the selection of those fittings, the specifications of those miniaturized fittings, is an important one, because the smaller you get, the higher output you get with these fittings, potentially more glare you could get. So the intensity increases dramatically. So it's about good luminaire design as well. So it's a balancing act of miniaturization and comfort. So that's the important sort of first development that we take into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing unless you've got something else to add, Lindsay, we had a presentation a few weeks ago about color rendering, and it's just a small point, but being able to manipulate the space and with that, creating that flexibility and then changing the color from cool white to a warm white space is, it's been there for a little while now. So tunable white is what we call it. But having the ability to change it by not compromising light quality is something that's come through a little bit more recently. And there's technology out there that's very new in the market, and we'll see how that goes, but that it just needs to be adapted into luminaires. And, the OEMs are talking to the manufacturers, luminaire manufacturers, to be able to integrate those technologies. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, it is. No, it's interesting. Mm-hmm. I guess more on a kind of already existing product front. We've seen lately a few people talking to us about systems that are available but with acoustic properties integrated or can be integrated within the lighting system. So it's aesthetically pleasing together, but you can have a light fitting and then have some acoustic panels or properties either come through, like the light fittings come through it, or it go across tracks so that it looks as a purposeful system, which is really interesting because a lot of the time, especially when you're in older, maybe refurbishment, now everybody's going full in the workplace, but adding lighting and acoustics, and you guys probably feel it as well with AV, sometimes it just feels a bit stuck on, or you're all kind of fighting to get the premium space, but having things that can work together purposefully and designed in a quality way is really interesting, and trying to get more of those key elements in the workplace to actually come together, I think is quite exciting. I think that's good for everyone.
Yeah, and on that technology can really be used well, especially as we have been and are moving more into these agile workspaces and open spaces and collaborative areas where we're trying to create, with sound and light and acoustics, a closed environment in what is an open setting. So there's an ability there to almost make this sort of intimate little space without having to put four walls around you. So that's kind of exciting.
Wow.
Yeah, okay.
So you're talking about, physically having a, open area, but then being able to use the light to create a space that feels like you're in a more intimate setting and not in a big cabin? Is that?
Yeah, look, again, this is from our hospitality learnings, from the start of the conversation. We said that's part of how we design. It's a fundamental way of how we do lighting design. And if you think about sitting in a low, dimly lit restaurant, there's a lot of noise around you, other people talking. However, you tend to zone out of that and focus on the person opposite you if it's a low accented table, if that table is lit purposefully. So, even though there's a lot of noise around you, you almost feel like you're in your own little space. So we draw on those experiences also in the workplace.
Almost tricking the brain.
Indeed.
Very cool. Okay. Oh, that's excellent, guys. I think we've covered a lot here today. You've really given us some insights into the value of having, lighting consultants and design on workspace projects. I think it's clearly more and more important, from what I'm seeing, to take advantage. You don't necessarily want to just sort of slap fittings on the walls or on the ceilings and meet compliance and move on. You're leaving so much on the table. So really appreciate the contributions. I'm sure the listeners are going to get a lot out of this. So thanks again to you, Jonathan, of course, but Michelle and Lindsay, really appreciate you coming on today. And where can the listeners find out more about both yourselves and what you do?
Well, thanks very much, David and Jonathan, for having us and allowing us to give a little bit of our insights in the lighting world. But our website is lightstudiomg.com, And it's the same as like Studio MG for our LinkedIn as well, so they can reach us there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again, and look forward to working with you on more projects in the future.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Simple podcast. To like, share, or discover more episodes, head over to Spotify. If you'd like to talk to us about AV in your workplace or learning environment, book an initial discovery call with David or Jonathan at konnectus.com.au. And remember, Tech Simple!